name is Robert Carstens. I was born to 1922. It was one of the fastest airplanes of the propeller driven before the jets came out. One of the fastest ones. They would give the P-51s or the P-47s a run for their money because they were as fast as they were. We were trained to hit the deck. That was our mission, to hit the deck and do the strafing for the fields. When I got over in the 9th Air Force in England, they never hit the deck. They never flew on the deck like the airplane was designed to do. And so we always flew at 10 to 14,000 feet. We never carried oxygen, but we were very vulnerable for flak. And that was our biggest enemy, was the German flak, because they had radar that could determine our altitude, and they would send up a barrage of enemy shells, exploding shells, at 10,000 or 15,000, whichever altitude their radar had determined we were flying. And they always seemed to have a knowledge of the targets that we were supposed to hit, so they would have a flak barrage over top of this particular city and dare us to fly through that in order to drop our bombs. So that's where our biggest losses were with the ACAC, or the anti-aircraft guns. The Ju-88s was the biggest enemy that we had to face because they could hit us at any altitude. And so we were always worried about, holy cats, we got to fly through that? And of course, I was only a gunner. I was not the pilot. And so whatever the pilots had determined, what altitude that we were going to fly through, it was a pilot that had to face all of these ACACs, all of these exploding shells over the city that we were destined to drop our bombs on. So all I was just a lowly gunner sitting in the aircraft and going along for the ride and checking for enemy fighters that never showed up. It was always the anti-aircraft that was our biggest mission. We lost 1/3 of all of our planes on a mission over Holland, and we lost 6 of the 18, with 6 each, because each bomb group have 6 airplanes, and we would combine having 18 aircraft over a particular target. And so on this one mission over Holland, we were trying to trap the Germans in a ambush, and they were really on the ball in hitting us. And at our altitude, between 10 and 15,000, we were very vulnerable to that gun. My brother was flying a B-17, and he was more worried about me flying at 10 or 12,000 than he was at 30,000 with the B-17 that he was a pilot on. It was just a hard airplane for the gunner's compartment, for the gunner itself to look through this periscope and scan the sky. Although you had only a portion of the sky to scan,
Right.
like 12 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, and 9 to 12.
Okay.
But there was only one gunner, so you were responsible for either the top or the bottom turrets, or you could turn the turrets over to the pilot also. So he would have the 650s in the nose, and I could give him the twin 50s on the top and the twin 50s on the bottom. So I could give him 4 more 50s. So that made the A-26 a very vulnerable or very formidable opponent up there.
So it looks like you started flying. Your first mission was on July 16th. Well, that's according to this here. So you started flying in July 1944?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was out of England with the A-20s.
Oh, yeah, with G models. Yeah, this is an earlier model of a A-20.
Okay.
So it didn't have the bubble that you were looking
Yeah.
at. Because you actually indicate here the model of it's an A-20G.
Okay.
This is the A-20B model, so it's a lot earlier.
Okay.
So and you have how long the mission was too. But this is really
Probably 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
Our missions were.
there's 3 hours 45 minutes, 4 hours, 3 hours,
Yeah.
4 hours and 5 minutes. So you took meticulous attention on all these missions.
Yeah.
Places like Nate's, St. Hilary, Compiègne. It's important to note that these missions were not so much the big missions like major cities. Those were allocated toward the 8th Air Force.
Yeah.
In England, there was 2 Air Force commands. One was the 8th. That was a strategic bombing.
And the 15th.
Well, the 15th was down in Italy.
That was, yes, because that's the one my brother was in, the 15th Air Force out of Italy.
Okay. They flew up the Italian peninsula toward targets. They were able to hit Germany, not so much Germany, but like Yugoslavia, Austria, Hungary, Romania, because the Poloasti oil fields were hit by the 15th Air Force. But also in England was the 8th and the 9th Air Force.
Right.
The 8th was the strategic Air Force, whereas the 9th was more tactical.
Right.
And you had smaller aircraft like the A-20s, A-26s, but you also had P-47s and P-51s that their primary job was not so much escort of the bombing, strategic bombing missions, but was the hitting targets like bridges, canals, small areas, primarily support for ground troops and their operations.
Yeah.
And one of the photographs I remember seeing of the Normandy invasion was some A-20s coming off of a mission. They just bombed Point du Hoc. That's the famous point between Utah and Omaha Beach that the Rangers had to scale the cliffs to take. And it was hit 3 times, and this picture shows A-20s coming off the target after it's been hit. So the 9th, that was, they did a lot of the close-in stuff, and they're operating closer to the ground, as Bob noted here. So, and when did you finish high school?
In 1939.
1939.
Yes.
And were you born in the area here, or?
No.
Where were you born?
I finished high school in Pinconning, Michigan. I grew up in a little town of Rhodes that was about 15 miles west of Pinconning. It was it was originally a logging village, and so that's where it was one-room school and one teacher that inspired me to serve my country. We had a celebration in Gladwin County that invited the little country schools to join in a parade down their main street, and my dad made a old car. He didn't make the car, but he had an old car and running boards on either side. And my teacher, Mrs. Spence Babcock, said, Mr. Carstens, can you make a platform on either side of this car so that my kids can stand there with a sword and a shield and sing a particular song that inspired me? It was entitled Only an Armor Bearer. Proudly I stand, waiting to follow at the King's command, marching with honor, should the order be, standing by my captain, serving faithfully. And this has stayed with me all my life and inspired me to join the service. I was a tool maker when the draft came by. I elected to go by my deferment that as a tool maker and join the Army. So I went to the draft board and told them that I didn't want a deferment. And so, okay, we'll take you. Once I was inducted in the service, I wanted to go into the Air Force, but I was flying a Piper Cub before I went in the service, and in order to get a commercial license, I had to pass a color test, and I found out that I was colorblind. I didn't know that I was colorblind, so the Army Air Force would not take me as a pilot. So I said, well, what have you got? Well, we'll give you 3 choices, and you tell us what you would like to go into. I loved the Air Force. I wanted to learn more about fixing the airplanes, the engines in particular. So I said, my 3 choices are mechanic, and mechanic. So what do? They put me as a gunner. I had no ideas about going into the Air Force as a gunner, but this is what they assigned me to. So I made the best of it, and I became a gunner. I went through the training of gunnery school in Laredo, Texas, armament school in Colorado, and after that I was sent to Florence, South Carolina for our overseas training, and that's where I met my pilot and the spare gunner, because the A-20 carried 2 gunners. And so we met the pilot, and we trained low-level flying, thinking that when we got overseas, we would be on the deck flying. We got overseas, and we landed in England, and that's where we got into the 9th Air Force, 416th Bomb Group at Wethersfield, England. And that's where we flew from England for 25 missions, flying over the Channel to get into France. And so after 25 missions, I lost my pilot. I don't know whatever happened to him, but I was a spare gunner from then on. And after 25 missions, we were sent over to France, to a airfield in France, at Mullen Airfield in France, and there were two airfields in France, one in Lyon, and the other in Mullen, France. And that's where we flew. And that's when we were assigned to the A-26, because we were flying the A-20s out of England over the Channel for 25 missions, and then the 26th or 27th missions were out of these airfields in France. They were not particularly hard missions. I was not really afraid of going on these missions. I was a Christian, and on these missions I would recite to myself the 23rd Psalm, and it gave me comfort. And so on these missions, I did my job of scouring the skies for enemy aircraft. I was never once hit with an enemy fighter. The only problems that we had was with the 88 German artillery piece that made a mockery of us. If we would have a cloud cover and we couldn't see the ground, we had radar, and Germans had a radar also. The radar can see through the clouds, but what we would do would be load a lead aircraft with tinfoil, these Christmas tree tinfoil, and they would precede our missions, and the enemy since they couldn't see us, but they used their radar, the radar would pick up this tinfoil, and they would shoot at the tinfoil, thinking this was the group that was going to bomb them.
Well, let me explain what that whole thing was. You described it pretty thoroughly, but the aluminum foil that he was referring to is what's called window, and this was a like chaff that they use now, and it was it would flutter in the air and it would screw up their radar and give them the readings that they would see on their screens would not be exactly where they're at. So this window would clutter in the air at one particular place, wouldn't tell them where exactly the targets were, where his aircraft were at, and so the enemy would fire, the Germans would fire at this window over here and not hit the aircraft. So it was a defensive type of effort.
Yes,
So,
you said that very well. So, what else is there? You know, I flew my missions, and when it was all over with, as far as I was concerned, I was sent back to the States, aboard a hospital ship. And although I was not injured, but I didn't have any KP when I was in France in our tents where we stayed. But aboard this hospital ship, I was put on KP for the full trip back to the States. But that one, I was one of the individuals that was not wounded. I was never wounded in the service. I lost some very close friends in the service. One in particular, a Don Capron from California, but he was sent to the Pacific Theater, and he was lost. My last letter to him came back to me saying he was missing in action. And so I lost several very good friends over there, although you're not supposed to make friends. You can't help but make friends in your training. And
In your book here that you have, that you let me look at, Bob, mentions Don Capron over here. He was a tech sergeant, and that was he was a non-commissioned officer. Had three up and 2 down as far as the stripes go, and he was from Whittier, California.
Yes.
A lot of times, what they did, if you didn't have enough points, there was a point system for sending people back from Europe back to the United States, and they took into consideration, for example, when you enlisted, how long you've been overseas, how long you've been in the service, any awards, if you had children, for example, that played into it. You had points for all this, and they added it all up, and in the beginning you needed 80 points to go home. And if you didn't have that, they rotated you out. There was no longer a need for infantrymen or ground troops. If you had any, you didn't have enough time, then you were assigned to a unit that was going to stay behind for occupation duty. The war was still going on in the Pacific, so what they did is they took people who didn't have enough points and they transferred them stateside. If there's any additional training that were required for the new theater of operations, they received that, and then they went over and were in the Pacific area, Asiatic Pacific Campaign area, for further service until the war ended. For the duration. So Bob had his time in and was able to be sent back stateside.
Well, sent back, the war ended as I was coming back aboard ship on that hospital ship. So when we landed in New York, I was assigned to go into the Pacific Theater. This was before the point systems came into effect. But when the points came out, I had enough points to be discharged, so I didn't have to go to the Pacific. But that's where we were assigned originally. So I was discharged, and I could resume my civilian life as a toolmaker. I was always sorry that I didn't get into my chosen occupation of being a mechanic, but since I had the toolmaking experience already, I had my job back when I came back to the service. And I'm proud of the service that I did serve, and I'm just sorry that I lost friends They gave the ultimate sacrifice with their life. And here I am sitting here, fat, dumb, and happy, and all. I shouldn't be here to be honored just because I went in and did my job and came out without a scratch. I thank the Veterans Administration. They've been very, very kind to me, and they have served my whole family. There were 5 of us in the Carstens family that served in World War II, and so we all came back, all of my brothers. I lost 2 brother-in-laws, one in the service in a B-26. That was a Martin Marauder, they called them, and I lost him, and I lost my brother-in-law in the Battle of the Bulge, where we were assigned a flight, and they asked for volunteers to hit the deck on that Christmas holiday, and they asked us all to sign a petition saying that we would go on this flight. The flight never materialized. I did sign, and I thought, I've been trained for this. I've never done anything for it, and at least I can do is to do my job, even though the outcome would not be very favorable. But I was proud that I did sign up. The flight never took off. I don't know why. I believe it was because the weather was bad. At that time of year, the Battle of the Bulge was a very critical stage of our armies there, and they needed help. And we were not able to give them because of the weather that grounded us.
I can explain to people what the Battle of the Bulge was, for the tape. After Normandy and fighting in northern France, the United States, all the Allied forces pushed the Germans right up to where the Siegfried Line is, and were beginning to push into Germany. It seemed all the Allies appeared to be overconfident that the war would be over by Christmas. It was the common attitude. But the Germans were very resourceful. They put together all the material they needed, logistical support they needed, the tanks, the aircraft, the manpower. They moved several divisions close to the Belgian border without being noticed. Their operational security was incredible. It was very effective. No one knew that this massive force was located that close to a quiet zone. There was a part of the line in Belgium from the south down in Luxembourg all the way up to I'm just trying to come up with a name here that would it was actually 60 miles long. So from Luxembourg all the way 60 miles north to the Belgian border, it was deemed a quiet area because it was the Ardennes, or the forest, was very hilly. You can't go cross country, you have to stay on the roads, and so it was a very restrictive area. And as I mentioned, the German operational security didn't give any indication that these troops were massing so close to the border. So what they did was they took troops, new divisions, like the 106th Division, which was a new division, no combat experience whatsoever, and they put them into the line in the Ardennes to get acclimated and get some operational experience. The 28th Infantry Division, which had fought really hard in the Hurgan Forest, it got scuffed up a little bit, was moved down into the Ardennes to rest and recuperate, get in replacements, that sort of thing. Operationally, it wasn't a unit that they could use at that particular point. There was some other units that were in that area as well. But on December 16th, 1944, the Germans attacked. They knew that bad weather was coming, probably why our aircraft never took off.
Yeah.
And there was a low cloud ceiling, so keeping everything down. So the Germans chose that particular time specifically because American and Allied air power would be neutralized. You couldn't use it. And that was the big problem because the Allies had air superiority at that time. And so this made the German assault was an asset. It improved the chances of success for the German attack. And initially it came off, total surprise. The 28th Division was pretty much destroyed. 2 out of 3 regiments of the 106th Division were surrounded and captured and destroyed. Other elements were destroyed and pushed back. But the resistance offered by these units slowed down the German advance to the point where other units can be pulled in, and it was a long, hard battle. And the Battle of the Bulge lasted from December 16th to January 15th but December 16th, 1944 to January 15th, 1945. And it started, initially when the attack started, there wasn't any snow, but then the snow started coming in shortly thereafter, and it made it very difficult to bring replacements in, and air support, close air support, tactical air support, like from the 9th Air Force, such as the A-26s and the P-47s, was badly needed, but they couldn't bring the aircraft in because of the poor weather conditions. So that's probably why Bob's missions were canceled.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later on when the sun came out and the clouds broke that they're able to get aircraft into the air.
Yeah.
Where were you flying out of at that particular time? Were you based in France or?
Out of France.
Okay.
Yeah. First out of Melun and then out of Lyon. They were formerly German airfields, and so we just took over what, as the Allied forces moved through France, these airfields were made available, and so that's where we landed. And so that was just fine. It brought us closer to the German front, and so our flights from those airfields were shorter, and so we were mainly there for ground support. Our missions primarily were ground support. We hit the rail lines, the German troop concentrations, submarine pens.
In looking at your book here, you described the date, type of aircraft, and the target. And a lot of these are exactly what you meant. Railway bridges, road intersections, road junctions. A lot of bridges went down because of your aircraft.
Yeah.
So anything to hinder the German movements, and supply depots, ammunition, defended positions. I was near Brest, supply depot, Railway Bridge. But a lot of these are small towns, villages, because of the bombing defensive positions. So, yeah, they kept you busy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would fly 2 missions in a day if they were just short missions.
I know from a lot of the aircraft that the 9th Air Force did a lot to support the guys on the ground.
Yeah.
And those were the guys that took the ground, and that was important for them to move forward to be able to bring the war to a conclusion.
That was our primary goal, actually, to help the ground forces in their quest of gaining a closer position to Germany. So,
Do you recall any missions that were particularly harder for you?
we would be briefed with the pilots on the missions that we were going to go on, and we were told as whether or not there was sufficient anti-aircraft guns on the way, what to look for, what to circumvent. And but since I was not a pilot, I was just along for the ride. The heavies, the B-17s and the B-24s, took the brunt of the German Air Force. Their fighters would concentrate on these heavy bombers because their primary targets were large cities, ammunition, oil refineries, ball bearing factories. Those were the heavy targets. The German fighters would concentrate on the 17s and the 24s primarily until our P-51s and the P-47s, P-38s made them sorry that they were fighting against a fighter. The fighters would always be high above us and above the heavy bombers so that they could dive down on the fighter fighters that were trying to destroy the bombers. In all the 52 missions that I flew in, we did not once encounter a German fighter.
Well, Bob, I'd like to thank you very much for sharing your experiences with me and everyone else. It's particularly great to sit here, and it's an honor for me to sit down here and shake your hand. Congratulations, and you had 100th. When was your 100th birthday?
Well, about a year ago.
Okay, so you're closing in on 101, right?
Yeah.
When's that going to happen? June?
February 19th.
February 19th.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wish you want to be among the first to wish you a very happy 101st.
Okay. My older brother was 101 also, that was flying the B-17. We all just did what we were told to do, and some of us were just lucky that we got through, and some did not. About 11 million service personnel in World War II, and I don't know what the percentage was that came back, but the majority of us came back. Those that didn't come back, my hat goes off to them. It's too late to say, I'm sorry that you gave your life, but we can all say, I hope that it never happens again, but we're all ready to go and serve again if the call came. I feel that even today, if they called me, I'm still a gunner. And I can volunteer.